Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Watkins Glen, the super speedway of road courses. It's fast, provides interesting strategies, and yesterday we had a lot of that. Fast speeds, interesting pit strategies, starting off the race in the wet weather in single file, a little bit of open wheel invasion into this, and teammates getting into each other while racing for the win yet again. Let's get into all that went down at the Glen. Number 1, Kyle Larson, the defending Cup Series champion, picks up only his second win of the season. Yes, you heard me right. His second win of the season, winning yesterday's GoBowling.com at the Glen, holding off AJ Allmendinger, Joey Logano, Chase Elliott, and Daniel Suarez for the victory. Kyle Larson came entering the season as the new champion of NASCAR, winning last year's championship. Started off the season with a record Daytona, then he would go on to win at his home track at Auto Club the following weekend with his first win of the season, locking him into the playoffs. Ever since then, though, Kyle Larson has really not been contending for race wins and has kind of lost a little bit of speed from where they were a year ago. Obviously, with the new car, it provided a little bit of a challenge for him to try to be as dumb as he was a year ago, but still, he's had some good runs regardless of all that. Lately, they've had some better results. They had a great car last weekend, but they lost the handling late. But this past weekend at Watkins Glen, they were fast the entire time. Fastest in practice, qualified outside pole, were keeping tabs with their teammate the entire day. At times, it looked like Larson had the better car, and then at times, Elliott was the better car. But then we had some late race restarts that really made the ending of this race very entertaining, where on the next to last restart, both teammates were on the front row, but Elliott took the outside lane and passed Larson off of turn number 1 and held the lead. Then we got another late race caution for Loris Hezemans spinning into the gravel in turn number 6, and that set up another late race restart. Both started exactly where they did, on the outside and on the inside this time. But going to turn 1, Kyle Larson locked up the right front a little bit and carried it a little high in 1 and forced his teammate Chase Elliott off the track and forced him into falling back from the lead. And Larson at the very end came out on top and held off AJ Allmendinger in those final few laps to get his second win of the season and his second win at the Glen. He won this race a year ago, and he swept the weekend, by the way, by winning the Xfinity race on Saturday, and albeit a, kind of handed to him and, winning when the seas parted when the top two in front of him spun in the bus stop. And after the race, interviewed, Kyle Larson was asked about what had happened on that restart with him and Elliott, and he said, yeah, I locked up the right front, and I didn't mean to get into him. Remember, these two got into it earlier this year, and it was at the other race that Larson won at this year at Auto Club. He was battling for the lead late with Joey Logano, then comes Chase Elliott back from 2 laps down with a massive run with probably the best car at the time to win, and Larson tries to come up to block and accidentally was too close to send him straight into the wall. Larson would go on to win. Elliott finished 2 laps down, but he was not happy about that. Larson got into it with him again, but he said, I did what I had to do for the win. I don't feel right about what happened to my teammate, but it wasn't necessarily his fault. He locked up the right front tire. It wasn't like he was trying to force him off. He was locked up, and it just carried him high and forced his teammate out of the lead. So it's one of those deals, but it was a good win for the 5 team to get them some momentum before the playoffs start. There's a couple of races to start off these playoffs which benefit this 5 car, including Darlington, Kansas, and Bristol. So there's optimism for this 5 car, especially now with their second win of the season. They could get some momentum going, and maybe they could be a contender and maybe get into the championship 4 by the time we go to Phoenix. So a big congrats to Kyle Larson and the 5 team on their big win yesterday at the Glen. Number 2, Chase Elliott, dominant on a road course, but comes up short. Started on the pole, obviously, as the road course king that he is, was fast in practice. He started on the pole, led the first couple laps in the wet weather, then slipped back when the track started to dry out and it was dry conditions. And then he put on the dry tires, and he started flying through the field, moved up, and went on a 2-stop strategy the entire time. He went with a 2-tire strategy as well as Larson. Benefited both of them, by the way. Both were able to get their track position back when pit stop cycle through with about 16 laps to go. Elliott took the lead, and it looked like he was going to drive up with the thing until those late race cautions for Joey Hand hitting the barrier, and then, of course, Loris Hezemans. Both those restarts, Elliott took the top of the restart, thinking he was going to be able to carry it into turn 1 and get a good exit off of 1. Well, of course, the last restart, he He was on the outside, Larson on the inside. Larson locks up, kind of slides up and takes Elliott out of the lead. And Elliott had to settle back into 6th before he rebounded to get a 4th place finish out of it. Asked about it post-race, I could tell he was holding back his anger because he wanted to win. He felt like he had the car. He said, congrats to Kyle Larson, and he and the 5 teams said they did a good job, and, we came up short. He said congrats to him. I think he was serious, although there's some people thinking that was a little sarcastic congratulations. He's trying to hold back his anger, obviously, and, of course, a lot of people in the media were asking him about the end of the race, and he, kept saying congrats because he held back his anger, and I think he maturely responded about what happened at the very end. Same with Kyle Larson, too. But Elliott, at the end of the day, comes home with a 4th place finish. He still has not yet won on a road course this year, which is very shocking. They have one more opportunity, and that is the Roval in the playoffs. So maybe he'll be able to make up for the one that could have been last year if it wasn't for his run-in with Kevin Harvick. There was one bright spot for the 9 car, despite leading the most laps and getting a top 5, which you could consider a really good day. Elliott locked up the regular season title on Sunday. After not scoring any stage points, but neither did the 12 car Ryan Blaney, Elliott officially locked up that regular season championship and now has 15 extra bonus points added to his points total for the playoffs. So he has all the stage wins and the race wins he's accumulated this year at 25 points. And now with these extra 15 points given to him, he will have 40 bonus points heading into the playoffs when we start at Darlington. Doesn't mean he can't pick up a few more this upcoming weekend. He could win both the stages and the win at Daytona, or he could just do one of the 3 or 2 of the 3 or whatever. But he has a good chance to get a couple more points for his points total for the playoffs. It was a good day for the 9 team despite the very end of the race. The big question is, are these teammates going to race each other probably? By the way, Elliott also mentioned his post-race interview. Can't wait to move on to Bristol next week. I think he meant to say Daytona, but is it a preview of maybe some retaliation coming at Bristol, even with teammates? Because that's an elimination race in the round of 16. And points-wise, Elliott should be in pretty good shape. Larson should be okay, but I wouldn't be, sleeping like an angel. I'd be a little bit worried. So we'll see how that transpires. But despite all that, Elliott with a 4th place finish, led the most laps, didn't win, but he did win the regular season championship. Number 3, road course aces. Shine all day long, but come up a little short. One of them being AJ Allmendinger, who's known for being a phenomenal road course racer, whether it's in the Cup Series, Xfinity Series, or his days in Champ Car and IndyCar. Allmendinger just has a knack for road course racing. And early in the race yesterday, on lap 2, I believe it was, he was spun out in the first turn by Austin Cindric, who locked it up. Allmendinger was pretty upset on the radio, and he told the spotter, tell the 2 car that if I ever see him again, he's getting the same thing. They never really saw each other the rest of the race, but Allmendinger was able to rebound from that spin and make it all the way back up there into the top 5. And of course, those late race restarts, he benefited from Larson forcing Elliott a little bit off the track. Allmendinger moved his way up to 2nd. And you thought, well, he might have something for Larson. He'll put the pressure on him. But at the very end, Larson just outpaced the 16 car in those final few laps. But a great result for AJ Allmendinger and the 16 team. They also will have one more opportunity to win on a road course, and that'll be the Roval in October. And Michael McDowell, who has also been known for a great road course racer, really, really good day. Perhaps the best executed road course race out of McDowell in the Cup Series since he's been with Front Row Motorsports. Started in the top 3, and about lap 7 or 8, took the lead from Chase Elliott on the wet tires, and he started to drive away. He had good speed in that race car. But unfortunately, in some of those late race pit stops, he fell behind the 9 car, who was a little quicker than him, as well as the 5. And then he fell back a few more spots and then lost some spots on the restart, and that kind of took him out of the equation. He ended up with a solid 6th place finish at the end of the day. But this could have been an opportunity for him with the conditions that we had for him to break through and get into the playoffs back-to-back years. Remember, last year he made the playoffs by winning the Daytona 500. Next weekend, he's going to have to go win Daytona if he's going to get back to the playoffs. And all this stuff he did this week, he did without his crew chief Blake Harris, who was on a 4-race suspension for a lug nut issue by losing a wheel on one of their pit stops. So McDowell is going to have his interim crew chief with him again next weekend when he goes to Daytona, and I'm sure he will be a contender and one to watch the entire night. If he's going to make the playoffs, he has a good chance to winning. So good run by both these road course aces, and Michael McDowell, you still have one more opportunity to make the playoffs, and that'll probably come with a win next week at Daytona, and we'll have to see what happens. Number 4, F1 star makes Cup debut. Iceman Kimi Raikkonen, the 2007 Formula One World Champion, made his NASCAR Cup Series debut this weekend in a third trackhouse car called Project 91, with the car number 91, made his Cup debut at Watkins Glen International this weekend. And I gotta say, just like Fernando Alonso when he moved from Formula One to run the Indy 500 in 2017, and he had a great car the entire day until he blew up late, both those guys in those different sports acquitted themselves very well with the new racing division that they ran at. Kimi Raikkonen, the entire weekend, had good speed in the car. They were top 20 in practice. Didn't have the best qualifying ever in like 25th spot, but I had a feeling if he could just learn, he could be up there by the end of the day for a solid result. By the time we started stage 2, Kimi Raikkonen was running in the top 10. Now, of course, everybody was on different strategies, but he stayed in the top 10 for a good, consistent 10 to 12 laps. There was some speed in that 91 car, and he was doing a really good job. When he was racing Chase Elliott in the early laps of stage 2, we were just thinking, we got one of the best road course racers of the Cup Series racing against one of the best circuit racers in the world. And it just was so entertaining to watch those guys. They ran each other hard, but they also ran each other smart. Kimi just did a phenomenal job. However, at the beginning of the final stage, when in the middle of traffic, he was trying to avoid an incident where Austin Dillon was spinning in the inner loop, and unfortunately he got bumped by Loris Hezemans and sent him right into the barrier and out of the race with a 37th place finish. It really sucked to see Kimi get knocked out because he was doing a good job, and he was improving, I think, as the race progressed, because he learned a ton from racing in the beginning at the rain, which he's known for in Formula One, and then the dry condition times with these good years, he just did a really good job. Of course, he had his, he has his Kimi answers, like, likes to say, blah, just like, it's a good experience. He really enjoyed the NASCAR community being here. Of course, he's been in NASCAR before, 11 years ago when he ran the Xfinity and truck race on the same back-to-back weekends at Charlotte during 2011 days of, summer speed weeks at Charlotte Motor Speedway for the All-Star race in the Coke 600. He ran both those races, had a top 15 in the truck race, not the best finish in the Xfinity race, but he finished. He did a good job yesterday despite the crest of the variant. So hopefully the Iceman will come back for another event next year. As a matter of fact, the Project 91 squad did announce that they are planning to run at least 6 to 8 races next year, most of them being road courses, but might get them for some premier events, like maybe put a driver for the wheel for the Daytona 500 or the Coke 600. We won't know, but it's good to hear that Trackhouse is expanding, and it was good to have them have a Formula One star behind the wheel of the 91 car this weekend. So despite the bad result, Kimi Raikkonen did a really good job, and hopefully he comes back in the near future, so let's see what happens. At number 5, the playoff bubble between Martin Truex Jr. and Ryan Blaney didn't really change that much. As a matter of fact, both drivers did not run well at all yesterday. Both finished Truex in 23rd, Blaney 24th. Pretty much both together at the very end of the race. They really never were factors. At times they got to the top 10, top 15, but they kept falling back because the cars were fading. And, there were other guys on fresher tires at the very end. So, just a really rough day. I mean, let's face it, Martin Truex Jr. and the 19 team have not nailed their road course program this year with this next-gen car. It's been a struggle for them. Blaney at times has looked okay, but not great. It was just another one of those days yesterday. So, it's now a 25-point cushion for Ryan Blaney over Martin Truex Jr. Now, one thing I want to quickly mention, that with Kyle Larson winning, because he didn't run this race this weekend, and will not run next weekend. Hopefully he'll be back come playoff time. Kurt Busch is now officially locked into the playoffs. Despite missing 6 races, he is going to be in the playoffs. Let's hope he's back in that 45 car by the time we go to Darlington. But at the moment, it's still Truex and Blaney that are battling it out for the final spot on points. They're both the only drivers that are eligible to try to make it in via points, but a win next weekend would certainly help. But just nothing really to smile about them yesterday. It was just a really rough day for both of them. So, ladies and gentlemen, the moment has come. Next weekend, we are off to the World Center of Racing at Daytona International Speedway. The bottom line, 15 drivers already know they're in the playoffs. Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Alex Bowman, William Byron, Kevin Harvick, Chase Briscoe, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell, Joey Logano, Ross Chastain, Daniel Suarez, Austin Cindric, and trying to think, Tyler Reddick are the 15 drivers that know, based off of wins, they are in the playoffs. They are guaranteed spots into the playoffs. That means one more spot remains open. And as I mentioned, Ryan Blaney or Martin Truex Jr. are the only two drivers that can make it in via points. However, a win would go a long ways farther than one of those guys. But what that does do is it opens the door for everybody else behind them that can only win. If we had a new winner yesterday, none of it would have mattered. Now, it definitely matters. And that makes the excitement and the drama even more entertaining leading up into this race. So the drivers that can win to get in, Martin Truex Jr. and Ryan Blaney, but the guys that must win to make it in, Eric Almirola, Austin Dillon, Eric Jones, Bubba Wallace, Chris Buescher, Brad Keselowski, Harrison Burton, Justin Haley, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Michael McDowell, Ty Dillon, Todd Gilliland, and Cole Custer. They are the only drivers that are within the top 30 in points that must win. Only one of those guys could win and lock themselves a spot in the 2022 NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. For any Corey LaJoie's fans, too far back from 30th, not going to be able to win even if you tried. Going to be looking back on the streak of rough races they had ever since their impressive run in Atlanta. Really took them out of equation to try to be at least close to 30th or be 30th by the time we get to Daytona. So, in general, it is 15 men battling for one spot. Who comes out on top? It's Daytona. I have no idea. This is going to be amazing. It's going to be an entertaining race. I can't wait for it. It's going to be one hell of a night. It'll get a little bit rough and rowdy at the very end, but that's what it's all about. So, with that being said, who will get the last spot? Leave your comments down below. Who do you think gets that final spot into the playoffs? Is it going to stay the same with Ryan Blaney? Can Martin Truex Jr. take him out by outpointing him or at least winning? Or anybody from Almirola down to 30th place in points in Ty Dillon? Any one of those guys, will any one of them win and lock themselves in? That's a question that remains to be answered. And how will the playoff drivers that are already locked in, how will they fare next weekend? They'll go for the win because they like to try to win to get momentum before the playoffs start. So it's going to be a fun, entertaining night. I cannot wait. Don't forget, it's on Saturday night on NBC, the Coke Zero Sugar 400 at Daytona. So thank you so much for watching. Subscribe, like. Congrats once again to Kyle Larson and the 5 team on their impressive win at Watkins Glen. Have a great week, everybody. Can't wait for Daytona. Let's go racing!